In the annals of military history, few weapons command the immediate, visceral respect, or terror, as the German Maschinengewehr 42. It was not merely a machine gun. It was an industrial marvel, a psychological weapon, and perhaps the single greatest piece of mechanical genius produced for the infantry during the entire Second World War. Known by friend and foe alike as Hitler's Buzzsaw, its legacy is etched into the scorched earth of every front, from the frozen steppes of the Soviet Union to the shell-blasted beaches of Normandy. Its sound alone became the soundtrack of the German advance, and later, their desperate defense. But the story of the MG42 is not just the story of noise and destruction. It is the story of necessity, efficiency, and the cold, hard logic of total war. The origins of the MG42 lie not in a sudden brilliant inspiration, but in the calculated failures of its predecessor, the MG34. When the Wehrmacht began its secret rearmament in the 1930s, the MG34 was its crowning achievement. It was revolutionary, a single weapon that could function as both a light machine gun, LMG, on a bipod for infantry assaults and a heavy machine gun, HMG, on a tripod for sustained, long-range fire. This concept, the Einheitsmaschinengewehr or universal machine gun, was a genuine breakthrough, simplifying logistics and unifying doctrine. The MG34 was a weapon of extraordinary precision and craftsmanship. It was a beautiful thing, manufactured with the meticulous care and tolerance of a fine Swiss watch. Its receiver was entirely milled from solid steel forgings, demanding hundreds of hours of highly skilled labor and precision machining. It possessed a variable rate of fire, capable of spewing 800 to 900 rounds per minute. It was reliable, powerful, and utterly dominant in the early campaigns of the Blitzkrieg. However, the rapid expansion of the German army, coupled with the grinding reality of sustained conflict, quickly exposed the MG34's critical flaw. It was simply too expensive and too slow to produce. The highly skilled laborers and specialized machine tools required to manufacture the MG34 were the same resources desperately needed for tanks, aircraft, and U-boats. As the war transitioned from the short, sharp campaigns of 1939 and 1940 to the vast, resource-devouring struggle against the Soviet Union in 1941, the German logistical chain began to buckle under the strain of providing enough MG34s to equip its millions of fighting men. The Eastern Front was the ultimate testing ground and executioner of German logistics. The vast distances, the brutal climate, and the sheer volume of Soviet manpower meant the German infantry divisions were constantly engaged, their weapons enduring unprecedented abuse from mud, snow, and relentless firing. The MG34, with its tight tolerances and high number of precisely machined parts, suffered. It became prone to jamming when fouled by the pervasive dust of summer or frozen solid by the sub-zero temperatures of winter. The need for a new machine gun, one that was robust, dirt cheap, and could be produced by the unskilled masses using simple manufacturing processes, became an overriding military imperative. The new weapon had to be designed not for precision, but for pure mass production and field ruggedness. In 1941, the German High Command issued the requirement for a new machine gun to replace the MG34. The design competition pitted some of Germany's established arms manufacturers against a relative newcomer, the company Metal- und Lackierwarenfabrik Johannes Grossfuss, Metal and Lacquer Goods Factory Johannes Grossfuss, known simply as Grossfuss. This company, which had no prior experience in small arms design, was tasked with creating a revolutionary solution. The winning design, the MG42, was an engineering triumph built upon simplicity and expediency. It discarded the complex milling process that defined the MG34. Instead, the MG42 was built almost entirely from stamped and pressed sheet steel. The receiver was formed by welding together two halves of stamped metal, a process far faster and cheaper than milling a single block of steel. This industrial simplification was the heart of its genius. A complex weapon like the MG34 required over 150 man-hours to manufacture. The MG42 could be built in just 75 man-hours, cutting production time in half and drastically reducing costs. But Grossfuss didn't stop at simplification. They enhanced performance. The MG42 utilized a roller locking system, a robust and simple mechanism that allowed the bolt to cycle with phenomenal speed. And it is this speed, this relentless tempo of destruction, that cemented its terrifying legend. While the MG34 fired at a respectable 900 rounds per minute, the MG42 was designed to fire at an astounding rate, 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute. This staggering cyclic rate was a deliberate feature, a tactical choice born of battle experience. At such speeds, the human ear cannot distinguish the individual shots. The sound of the MG42 was not a rattling burst of gunfire. It was a single, sustained, ripping sound, like canvas being torn violently in two, or, as Allied troops soon nicknamed it, Hitler's buzzsaw or the bone saw. This terrifying, high-pitched scream had an immediate and crushing psychological effect on anyone pinned down by its fire. An American infantryman, reflecting on his experiences in the ETO, later wrote that the sound of the MG42 made the MG34 sound like a polite gentleman clearing his throat. The buzzsaw, by contrast, sounded like pure fury, an unceasing metallic voice of death that convinced any soldier on the receiving end that he was facing not one, but multiple machine guns. The volume of fire was so intense that it made raising one's head or even daring to move an inch a potentially fatal decision. Enemy formations were instantly scattered, pinned down, and paralyzed. The sheer rapidity of fire dramatically increased the probability of hitting a moving target. The goal was not necessarily surgical accuracy, but overwhelming suppression. This phenomenal rate of fire, however, created a new problem: overheating. The standard German 7.92 mm ammunition, fed at 1,200 rounds per minute, quickly turned the barrel into a glowing red rod. The solution developed by Grossfuss was another stroke of design genius: a quick-change barrel system. A trained gunner, using a simple lever on the right side of the receiver, could swing open the breech, eject the spent barrel, and slide a cool replacement barrel into the weapon in as little as 6 seconds. This rapid barrel change system was pivotal. It was the MG42's ability to maintain sustained fire that defined its tactical dominance. The German machine gun team, composed of the gunner, the assistant gunner carrying spare barrels, and the ammunition carriers, could truly hold a position indefinitely. The MG42 was a weapon perfectly suited for the demands of the Eastern Front. It was a masterpiece of lethal efficiency, born from the resource scarcity and industrial urgency of the Nazi war machine. It was ugly, it was cheap, it was fast, and it was deadly, representing the perfect culmination of German infantry doctrine. The age of the meticulously crafted machine gun was over. The age of the buzzsaw had begun. Its sound would define the brutal second half of the war, a relentless reminder that German firepower, even when retreating, was never to be underestimated. The raw specifications of the MG42 only tell half the story. Its true power lay in the rigid, uncompromising German doctrine that dictated its use. Unlike Allied armies, where the rifleman was considered the core of the squad, the Wehrmacht placed the machine gunner and his weapon at the absolute center of their infantry tactics. This was not a supporting weapon. It was the dominant weapon of the squad. The entire organization, movement, and fighting style of the German Gruppe, squad, revolved around the need to feed, protect, and maximize the firepower of the MG42. A standard German squad typically consisted of 9 to 11 men. The squad leader, for riflemen, and the Maschinengewehr Trupp, the machine gun team itself, usually comprised of the gunner, MG42, the assistant gunner, MG42, and 1 or 2 ammunition carriers. The gunner was the most skilled and highly trained member of the squad. The assistant gunner carried the vital spare barrels, the toolkit, and extra ammunition, and his primary duty was to manage the rapid barrel change, making the MG42's sustained fire truly terrifying. This doctrine created a tactical dominance that the Allies struggled to counter. In a firefight, the MG42 would immediately open fire, using its tremendous rate to achieve fire superiority and pin down the enemy. The rifleman, armed mostly with the Karabiner 98K bolt-action rifles, would then maneuver under the protective blanket of the machine gun's suppression. They were essentially the security detail for the Buzzsaw. This inverted tactical pyramid, machine gun dominant, rifle subordinate, allowed a well-trained German squad to effectively outfight and halt a larger Allied force relying on rifle fire. The sheer volume of ammunition consumed by the MG42 meant logistics were always a challenge. The assistant gunner often carried 3 or more loaded spare barrels in a metal case, and the entire team hauled hundreds, sometimes thousands, of rounds in belts or drum magazines. An MG42 could empty a standard 50-round ammunition drum in under 4 seconds, and a 250-round belt in about 12. This staggering consumption rate meant the German supply chain had to prioritize 7.92 mm machine gun ammunition above almost everything else. The experience of encountering the MG42 on both the Eastern and Western fronts was universally terrifying. American and British soldiers, accustomed to the slower, more deliberate pop-pop-pop of their own machine guns like the Bren or the Browning M1917, were utterly demoralized by the MG42's continuous, high-pitched scream. On the Western Front, particularly after the D-Day landings in 1944, Allied troops learned quickly that the first priority upon encountering German resistance was to locate and neutralize the MG42. The Germans, often entrenched in well-prepared defensive positions, would use the MG42 to sweep wide fields of fire. In the dense bocage of Normandy, the sound echoing off the earthen walls and thick hedgerows made it impossible to pinpoint the exact location of the weapon, turning every step into a calculated risk. Allied reports described it less as a weapon and more as a force of nature, a psychological hammer that shattered morale before the physical assault even began. Many American soldiers referred to the high velocity of the German 7.92 mm round as zipping through the air, and the volume of fire ensured that those zips were continuous. The Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy provides a grim example of the MG42's defensive mastery. Dug into ancient stone ruins and overlooking open ground, German paratroopers used the MG42 to perfection, turning every Allied advance into a brutal, costly crawl. The rapid barrel change system ensured the defenders could maintain continuous fire on fixed positions, negating the traditional tactic of waiting for an enemy machine gun to overheat. On the Eastern Front, the MG42 faced its most relentless test. The sheer scale of Soviet assaults meant that the machine gunners often fired until they were literally buried in spent brass casings. In the ruined streets of Stalingrad or the vast open plains of Kursk, the Buzzsaw was indispensable. Its rugged construction, its tolerance for dirt, mud, and snow, gave it a decisive edge over the older MG34. While the cold often made the MG34 sluggish or completely seized up, the MG42's looser tolerances and simpler mechanism were generally less affected, a testament to its design philosophy prioritizing durability over cosmetic precision. However, the MG42 was not without its drawbacks. Its primary flaw remained its massive appetite for ammunition. German logistics could barely keep up with the demands of their own doctrine. Furthermore, the very high rate of fire meant that it was exceptionally difficult for the gunner to fire short, controlled bursts. It was a weapon designed for sweeping, destructive fire, which often led to ammunition waste, especially in the hands of inexperienced troops rushed into battle late in the war. The rapid barrel change, while brilliant, also meant the gunner had to expose himself briefly to the enemy to complete the maneuver, a risky moment the Allies quickly learned to exploit. Despite these minor failings, the MG42 fundamentally changed the face of infantry warfare. It affirmed the principle that the firepower of the infantry squad, and therefore the outcome of close-quarters fighting, rested not on the accurate long-range rifle, but on the capacity for overwhelming, sustained, automatic suppression. The Allies quickly began to search for their own high rate of fire weapons, recognizing that the German concept of machine gun dominance was tactically sound, even if their own industrial capacity lagged behind the terrifying efficiency of the Buzzsaw. The transition from the exquisite, costly MG34 to the utilitarian MG42 was a brutal, pragmatic lesson in the economics of total war. Germany, realizing it could not win through superior numbers, desperately focused on maximizing the destructive output of every soldier through superior, highly efficient technology. The MG42 was the physical embodiment of this doctrine. Its design was driven not by the aesthetic preferences of engineers, but by the cold, hard demands of the Chief Armament and Equipment Office, Heereswaffenamt, to simplify, cheapen, and accelerate production on an unprecedented scale. The MG42's ability to be mass-produced lay in the revolutionary application of sheet metal stamping. This technique, common in the automotive industry, involved pressing flat sheets of low-grade steel into complex shapes using massive hydraulic presses. These stamped pieces, the receiver halves, the perforated barrel shroud, and even the trigger group, were then rapidly joined together by spot welding and seam welding. This process dramatically bypassed the time-consuming and resource-intensive need for highly skilled machinists and specialized milling machines. It meant that factories previously producing washing machines, car parts, or bicycles could be rapidly converted to churn out weapons. This industrial pivot was crucial. By 1944, at the height of the war, the MG42 cost German manufacturers approximately 250 Reichsmarks to produce, while the older MG34 still cost over 327 Reichsmarks. More importantly than the monetary cost was the time saved. The MG42 required only 75 man-hours of labor, compared to 150 hours for the MG34. This efficiency allowed Germany to produce nearly 425,000 MG42s during the war, ensuring that the Wehrmacht, despite its immense losses, never truly suffered a shortage of the most powerful infantry weapon available. Beyond the sheet metal body, the MG42 housed a mechanical innovation that was the key to its phenomenal rate of fire: the roller-locking bolt mechanism. This system, designed by Dr. Werner Gruner of Grossfuss, was simple, robust, and highly effective. Instead of the rotating bolt used in many rifles, or the simpler toggle lock, the MG42 utilized small steel rollers that locked the bolt securely into the breech during firing. As the high-pressure gas from the cartridge acted on the base of the bolt, the rollers were forced inward, unlocking the bolt and allowing the weapon to cycle backward. This process was extremely smooth, reliable, and, crucially for its high cyclic rate, very fast. The low reciprocating mass of the bolt assembly contributed directly to the weapon's speed, giving it that characteristic, ripping sound. However, the rapid production process did introduce new challenges. While the weapon was generally rugged, early models suffered from issues related to the welding process, and the sheet metal parts, while cheap, were not as durable as the solid milling of the MG34, leading to a shorter service life under sustained fire. The intense heat generated by the high rate of fire also demanded a steady supply of chromed-lined barrels, a necessity that became difficult to maintain as the war crippled German infrastructure and resources in its final years. Despite the manufacturing pressure, the MG42 remained reliable, proving its worth in the most brutal environments. The German machine gunner depended on his ability to field-strip the weapon quickly for cleaning and maintenance. The MG42 was brilliantly designed for this, breaking down into its major components quickly and without the need for specialized tools, a critical advantage when fighting in the mud and snow of the Eastern Front or the sands of North Africa. The story of the MG42, however, did not end with the fall of the Third Reich. Its design was simply too good, too fundamentally sound, to be relegated to the history books. After the war, as the newly formed West German Army, Bundeswehr, sought to rebuild its forces and align itself with NATO, it needed a standard machine gun. The initial Allied ban on the rearmament of Germany quickly faded in the face of the Cold War and the Soviet threat. The German engineers recognized that the core roller-locking mechanism and the sheet metal construction were unparalleled in terms of reliability and efficiency. They decided to resurrect the MG42, but with one critical change. It was rechambered to fire the standard 7.62 by 51 mm NATO cartridge. This modernized version, designated the MG1, and later the highly refined MG3, quickly became the standard general-purpose machine gun, GPMG, for the Bundeswehr. The MG3, which is essentially a post-war MG42 adapted for NATO standards, maintained the iconic 1,200 rounds per minute rate of fire and the quick-change barrel system. Its longevity is staggering. The MG3 remains in service with the German Army and is used by dozens of nations worldwide, a true testament to the original 1942 design. The fact that a weapon born from the resource desperation of the Third Reich remains a frontline machine gun today is a powerful reflection of its initial engineering genius. It is a lineage that few other World War II weapons can claim. The Buzzsaw's technology, therefore, became an integral, permanent part of the Western Alliance's defensive capability. The MG42's arrival on the battlefield was a profound shock to Allied military planners and small arms developers. The sheer difference in its operational tempo forced them to radically reassess their own infantry firepower doctrines. While the MG42 was the German squad's central weapon, the Allied focus still lay largely with the infantry rifle, the American M1 Garand or the British Lee Enfield. These were accurate, reliable weapons, but they were no match for the MG42's ability to put down a continuous, impenetrable curtain of fire. The terrifying sound and sustained capability of the MG42 immediately triggered an arms race in machine gun development among the Allies. American ordnance experts, studying captured MG42s, were astounded by the simplicity and cost-effectiveness of the stamped metal design. They recognized the brilliance of the roller locking mechanism and the rapid barrel change system. The U.S. immediately began projects to develop its own lightweight, mass-producible machine gun, with efforts ultimately leading to later concepts like the T-44 and, eventually, the M60 machine gun, a direct descendant in philosophy, if not in mechanism, of the German GPMG concept. The very existence of the MG42 validated the principle that the future belonged to the universal, high-rate-of-fire machine gun, rather than separate light and heavy variants. For the soldier facing the Buzzsaw, survival depended on instantaneous tactical reaction. American doctrine quickly adapted to prioritize the immediate suppression of the MG42 with mortars, rifle grenades, or concentrated automatic fire from the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, or the heavier M1919 machine gun. The motto was simple: silence the Buzzsaw, or you die. The MG42 was responsible for an astronomically high percentage of Allied casualties in close combat during the latter half of the war. Its relentless noise was a constant reminder of the lethality that awaited any exposed infantryman. The experience of the German machine gunner was equally intense. The MG42 was the most crucial man in the squad, but also the most heavily burdened and exposed. He carried the heavy weapon itself, spare parts, and ammunition, often amounting to a load of over 50 pounds. The gunner lived in a world of frantic action, locating the target, laying down sweeping bursts, correcting for muzzle climb, and most critically, managing the heat. A veteran MG42 gunner could feel the exact moment the heat began to distort the barrel's accuracy. The quick-change procedure, practiced endlessly in training, became a matter of life and death. The gunner would signal the assistant, who would swiftly open the receiver latch, use a heat-proof mitt to grasp the glowing barrel, flick it out, and slide the cool barrel in place, locking the breech. This was often performed while under direct fire, demonstrating the extraordinary discipline and precision of the German infantry teams. It was a symbiotic relationship. The gunner brought the death, and the assistant brought the sustained life to the weapon. The MG42 played a defining, desperate role in Germany's final defensive battles from 1944 onwards. It was the centerpiece of the legendary defenses erected in the West, such as the Atlantic Wall. At Omaha Beach on D-Day, the American forces were shredded by MG42 fire that poured out from concrete bunkers and fortified strongpoints. The German defense here was a perfect demonstration of the MG42's maximum potential. Long, sweeping fields of fire focused on a fixed approach route, combined with a quick-change barrel system to defeat the natural limitation of overheating. The fire was so intense and so rapid that the water in front of the beach literally boiled with bullets. Similarly, in the brutal winter fighting of the Battle of the Bulge, the MG42 excelled in defensive ambush positions. Concealed in the dense Ardennes forest, a single German machine gun team could hold up an entire company of American troops, relying on the weapon's superior rate of fire to dominate the tree lines and slow down the Allied advance. The German tactic was always to establish machine gun dominance first, then use accurate rifle and mortar fire to target soldiers attempting to outflank the weapon. The MG42 was a weapon that demanded respect, even from those who hated it. It was pragmatic, powerful, and utterly reliable. A machine that performed its singular, destructive task flawlessly, regardless of the ethical or political aims of those who wielded it. It stands as a terrifying monument to the destructive capability that can be achieved when engineering genius is focused entirely on the grim efficiency of killing. It truly symbolized the high watermark of conventional machine gun design in the 20th century. The terrifying reign of the MG42 was not just a matter of statistics and engineering. It cemented a cultural and historical reputation that transcends its role as a mere weapon. In the collective memory of the Allied forces, the MG42 became the definitive sound of the German military, replacing the distinctive sound of the early MP40 submachine gun. Its high cyclic rate gave it an almost mythic quality, transforming the simple infantry machine gun into something almost mechanical and inhuman. The nickname Hitler's Buzzsaw was perfect, conveying both the raw, aggressive power of the Nazi regime and the machine's terrifying, continuous sound. It was an oral signature that struck fear deep into the heart of any soldier advancing across open ground. The Germans themselves, with their typical dark military humor, sometimes called it the Innocentzige or bone saw, acknowledging its deadly efficiency. This reputation was amplified by post-war media. In countless films, novels, and more recently, video games, the MG42 sound effect has been used as shorthand for intense, uncompromising World War II combat. Even today, sound designers often pitch up the audio of other machine guns to replicate that uniquely frightening, tearing canvas sound, confirming its place as the iconic voice of the German infantry. The MG42 became a symbol of the Wehrmacht's technological edge and their stubborn, often fanatic, will to resist. Its immediate, devastating impact forced the Allies to recognize the central role of the machine gun in modern combat. Prior to the MG42's dominance, American doctrine viewed the machine gun as a heavy, crew-served weapon used primarily for defensive, sustained fire. The MG42 proved it could be light enough to be a highly mobile offensive weapon, capable of sprinting forward with the assault team to seize fire superiority immediately. This realization directly influenced post-war machine gun design worldwide. The concept of the General-Purpose Machine Gun, GPMG, a single weapon adaptable for light assault use on a bipod and heavy defensive use on a tripod, was definitively proven by the MG42. As the war entered its final, agonizing phases, 1944 and 1945, the MG42 transitioned from a weapon of offensive dominance to a desperate tool of defense. In the face of overwhelming Allied air superiority and limitless supplies, the German soldiers' only consistent advantage lay in the MG42. In the defensive fighting across the Rhine, in the shrinking perimeter of the Reich, and particularly in the savage block-by-block fighting for cities like Aachen and Berlin, the MG42 was irreplaceable. It was the only weapon that could impose a high casualty rate on the advancing infantry long enough for counterattacks to be organized or for political time to be bought. Yet, even the MG42 could not escape the economic collapse of the Third Reich. While the design was simple, the requirement for high-quality spring steel for the bolt and the specialized roller bearings for the locking mechanism remained absolute. As Allied bombing crippled German ball bearing plants and transportation networks, the quality control of MG42 production began to suffer. Late-war MG42s, often manufactured by inexperienced workers using substitute materials, experienced higher rates of malfunction and decreased longevity. The metal components were sometimes improperly treated, leading to early wear and failure. Even the quick-change barrels, vital to the system, became scarce or were made with inferior steel, further limiting the gun's sustained fire capability in the final months. This decline in material quality is a grim, final footnote to the story of a weapon designed for maximum efficiency. It was a weapon of industrial brilliance, but one that ultimately succumbed to the industrial collapse of its own nation. The MG42's ability to function despite these challenges is what makes its survival so remarkable. Its fundamental engineering, the large extraction port, the forceful cycling of the bolt, the reliance on stamping, meant that even a poorly manufactured MG42 was often more reliable than the complex older weapons it replaced. It was a machine designed to be forgiving of dirt, mud, and the crudity of late-war production methods. The post-war legacy of the MG42 is one of the most significant in small arms history. The adoption of the MG3 by the Bundeswehr and its spread throughout NATO nations underscores this influence. When Germany rearmed, the MG3 was a crucial element of their NATO standardization. It maintained the MG42's phenomenal rate of fire, but its use of the standard 7.62 by 51 mm NATO round and improved materials meant it met modern requirements. The MG3's service life, stretching into the 21st century and seeing action in conflicts like Afghanistan and the Balkans, is perhaps the greatest testament to the MG42's fundamental engineering genius. It is a lineage that binds the industrial legacy of the Third Reich to the defensive architecture of the Western Alliance. Furthermore, the MG42's revolutionary roller locking system did not end with the MG3. This efficient and reliable mechanism was later adapted and refined by Spanish arms designers and ultimately became the foundation for the entire family of Heckler & Koch weapons, the globally renowned G3 rifle and the ubiquitous MP5 submachine gun. From the terrifying buzzsaw of the Eastern Front came the precision instruments used by elite counterterrorism units worldwide, a silent, unbroken technological thread running through 80 years of small arms history. The roller locking principle proved its worth across multiple calibers and weapon types, cementing the MG42's design as one of the most fertile and influential in modern firearms development. This enduring technical legacy forces a serious, final reflection on the nature of the weapon itself. The MG42 was born from a regime of total war, yet its design principles were rooted in pure, amoral engineering excellence. It demonstrated that genius in design, the successful marriage of high performance with low-cost mass production, could be achieved even under the most desperate and resource-starved conditions. The MG42 did not win the war for Germany. No single weapon could overcome the combined industrial might of the Allies. But it dramatically extended the war, making every Allied advance painfully costly. It perfected the concept of the defensive killing zone, enabling small groups of dedicated soldiers to hold ground against superior forces for weeks and months. The MG42 stands today as a chilling symbol of destructive efficiency. It represents the ultimate triumph of mechanical design, achieving unparalleled lethality with elegant simplicity. Yet, every click of its mechanism, every tearing burst of its fire, is inseparable from the human cost of the conflict it helped to define. It is a powerful, undeniable reminder that technology, when focused entirely on warfare, can achieve horrifying perfection. The MG42 was the ultimate tool for its terrible purpose, and its legacy is the solemn realization that the face of modern combat was irrevocably shaped by the rhythmic, continuous scream of Hitler's buzzsaw.